What if one of the most famous miracle stories in the Bible, Jesus walking on water, isn't really about walking on water at all? At least not in Matthew's version. When we compare Matthew's telling to his source in Mark, we discover something fascinating. Matthew turned a simple miracle into a coded message for his struggling church community. Let's learn how to read between the lines. Scholars use a method called redaction criticism. Redaction means editing. This approach compares different versions of the same story to uncover what each author cared about most. Here's the key insight. Matthew used Mark as his source. This isn't speculation, it's scholarly consensus based on extensive textual analysis. Matthew follows Mark's order and often copies word for word. But when Matthew changes something, that change reveals his theological priorities. Additions show what matters to him. Deletions show what doesn't fit his message. Changes show how he reframes meaning. German scholar Gunther Bornkamm and his students pioneered this method in the 1950s. They applied it to Matthew's Gospel and discovered that Matthew wasn't just copying Mark, he was preaching. Every editorial choice served his community's needs. Now let's apply this method to the walking on water story. In Mark chapter 6, the account is straightforward. Jesus walks on water. The disciples are terrified. Jesus calms them, gets in the boat. End of story. The disciples are utterly astounded with hardened hearts. Mark emphasizes their failure to understand. Matthew tells the same story differently. First, he intensifies the struggle. The boat is battered by waves and the wind was against them. Mark's version is calmer. Second, and this is crucial, Matthew adds an entire episode that doesn't exist in Mark, Peter's water walking attempt. Peter asks to walk on water, succeeds briefly, doubts, starts sinking, cries, "Lord, save me." And Jesus catches him, saying, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" None of this appears in Mark. Third, Matthew transforms the ending. Instead of confused disciples with hardened hearts, Matthew's disciples worship Jesus and confess, "Truly you are the Son of God." These aren't minor differences. Matthew completely restructured the story's meaning. The question is, why? What do these changes reveal about Matthew's agenda? So Bornkamm argued that Matthew transformed Mark's miracle story into an allegory, a story where elements symbolize something else. The boat represents the church. Early Christians commonly used boat imagery for their community. The storm, waves, and opposing wind represent persecution. Matthew's community faced real threats. Peter represents every believer who wants to follow Jesus but struggles with doubt. His experience mirrors what Matthew's readers were living through. The allegory continues when Peter cries, "Lord, save me." The Greek word for save carries double meaning, physical rescue and spiritual salvation. Matthew's readers would hear both. Jesus catching Peter shows Christ rescuing the faithful who cry out, and the disciples' confession, "Truly you are the Son of God," models the proper Christian response, worship and the declaration of faith. Mark's confused disciples become Matthew's worshiping church. This transformation serves Matthew's pastoral purpose. He's not just telling what happened, he's teaching his community how to respond when their faith wavers during persecution. One phrase confirms Matthew's specific concern, little faith. The Greek word is oligopistos. It appears 4 times in Matthew's Gospel. It appears 0 times in Mark, 0 times in John. Luke uses it once, in a passage parallel to Matthew, suggesting he borrowed it. This is Matthew's signature vocabulary. He invented a term for believers who have faith but struggle with doubt. Not unbelievers, not strong believers, people in between. Matthew's community was filled with such people. They believed in Jesus but wavered under pressure. Matthew wrote to encourage them. Matthew's gospel reveals a community that was small, persecuted, and mixed, containing members of varying faith levels. This explains another distinctive Matthean parable, the wheat and weeds. A farmer plants good seed, but an enemy sows weeds among the wheat. Servants want to pull the weeds immediately. The master says, no, wait until harvest, or you'll uproot good plants too. Matthew's message: the church contains people of varying faith. Some are strong, some are weak, some may not be genuine at all. Separation happens at judgment, not now. Live with the mixture, focus on your own growth. Don't give up on struggling believers. Matthew's Jesus has high standards. Where Luke's Jesus says, be merciful, Matthew says, be perfect. Yet Matthew also shows more grace for those still growing. Peter fails, but Jesus catches him. The disciples doubt, but they still worship. Little faith is a rebuke, but it's also recognition that some faith exists. Matthew holds both truths. Aim high, but don't despair when you fall short. This tension defines Matthew's pastoral approach. He challenges his community toward perfection while reassuring them that Jesus rescues those who cry out in their weakness. How can you apply this method? When you notice differences between gospel accounts, don't dismiss them as contradictions. Ask instead, what is this author trying to teach? Each gospel writer was a theologian with a specific audience and message. Mark wrote for one community with certain needs. Matthew edited Mark for a different community with different needs. Neither is wrong. Both are true to their purpose. This approach works for any parallel passage. Compare the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew to the Sermon on the Plain in Luke. Compare the different resurrection accounts. The differences aren't problems, they're windows into early Christian communities. Some people worry this approach undermines the gospel's reliability. The opposite is true. Redaction criticism reveals that the Gospels are more than historical reports. They're theological interpretations by people who staked their lives on Jesus. Matthew didn't add the Peter episode because he had better sources than Mark. He composed it to preach to his people. That's not deception. That's pastoral care. Ancient audiences understood this. They expected teachers to shape traditions for their communities. We should read with the same expectations. Matthew wasn't just copying Mark, he was preaching to his people. A small struggling community facing persecution, filled with members of varying faith. His message through the walking on water story. You may have little faith now. That's not disqualifying. Keep your eyes on Jesus. When you start to sink, and you will cry out, he will catch you. The proper response isn't perfect faith. It's worship despite imperfect faith. Truly, you are the Son of God, spoken by disciples who had just doubted. That's Matthew's gospel. That's his gift to struggling believers then and now.